agenda to celebrate and pay tribute to you and your enormous contributions and leadership within the ILI, and particularly to the Indigenous Guardians movement. We have a few surprises for you. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about Dave for the audience here and those who have joined us in the live stream. Dave is a proud member of the Casca Dene Nation, whose traditional territory extends over a large part of northeastern British Columbia and southeastern Yukon. In the numerous chapters of your life's work, the many and varied positions that you've held and the responsibilities that you've carried are simply legion. It would take most of the afternoon to share the details of even a part of Dave's life, so I'm not going to try, but rather I'll share with you some highlights as a kind of draft forward of a book that deserves to be written. His life story is both rich and unique and marked by enormous triumphs and his shares of tribulations on the way through. His first 7 years were spent on the trap line near Fort Good Hope Lake, BC, or near Good Hope Lake, BC, sorry to the Northwest Territories Fort Good Hope representatives here. His education included being a survivor of the infamous Lower Post Residential School, high school in Whitehorse, where we are told he was a basketball star, and then on to college in Thunder Bay and pre-law at UBC. Come on, Dave, don't be too humble here. He was then hired on as announcer at CBC Northern Services and joined the first ever Indigenous broadcast team to report to Northern listeners the proceedings of the historic Berger Inquiry. The Berger Inquiry report provided a forum for the Indigenous peoples of the North to share their stories, to express their worldviews, and to announce their nationhood to the world. And it was an experience that profoundly shaped the young Dave Porter's future path. This path would include an election as vice chair of the Council of Yukon Indians, as it was then known, for 2 terms. He was involved in land claims, economic development, and led an initiative to establish radio and TV infrastructure in the Yukon, becoming the founding chair of the Northern Native Broadcasting. In 1982, Dave was elected to the Yukon legislature, where he served as Minister of Renewable Resources, Tourism, and Constitutional Devolution, as well as becoming Deputy Premier upon re-election in 1985. Next, he was named the founding Executive Director of the Yukon Human Rights Commission. He then accepted the position of Deputy Minister of Culture and Communications for the Government of the Northwest Territories. In this capacity, he oversaw the GNWT's participation in the establishment of the Television Northern Canada, efforts which contributed to the eventual creation of the Aboriginal People's Television Network. In the 1990s, he served as Assistant Deputy Minister of Aboriginal Affairs in British Columbia and was part of the team that established the treaty negotiation process in the province. He also served as founding commissioner of the BC Oil and Gas Commission. At home, he became chief negotiator of the Casca Dene Council and was an important leader in the establishment of the Muskwakichika Management Area, protecting 4.4 million hectares of traditional lands in northern British Columbia. He went on to become the chair of the Casca Dene Council, and in that job established youth camps on the land, which ran every summer for over a dozen years, a legacy of which he is very proud. He also worked to create the Denikiah Institute, and there's some Denikiah Institute folks here in the room. Hello, Jillian. To protect the traditional territory and knowledge and environmental integrity of the Casca Dene traditional territory. He continues to serve as the president of the Denikiah Institute, the Casca organization leading the development of their proposed IPCA, the Dene-Kakusan. You'll have to correct me on that pronunciation, Jillian. After his term at the Casca Dene Council, he was elected to be the political executive of the BC First Nations Summit and served 2 terms in which the Indigenous political organizations in BC united to form the BC First Nations Leadership Council. He was also involved in the creation of the First Nations Energy and Mining Council, and to this day still serves as its CEO. Since the early 2000s, he's been involved particularly in the work to protect the boreal. Dave always talks about the importance of the boreal forest in his deep voice. Protect the boreal. Serving on the serving on the Canadian Boreal Initiatives board, and more importantly, helping to create the ILI from this work. For those of you who don't know, the ILI emerged out of the International Boreal Conservation Campaign and basically replaced the Canadian Boreal Initiative to become the lead advocacy organization here in Canada. He still serves as ILI senior advisor. He's also a board member on the ILI and is held in enormous regard and is considered a mentor by all in the ILI family and by me personally, Dave. You've been such a great mentor. As you can see from his experience, and I'm exhausted just skimming through the surfaces. This is 10 pages, by the way, of all he's done. He brings great wisdom, strategic smarts, imagination, and enormous passion to the work of protecting and enhancing our rights, caring for and being the decision makers on our lands and waters, encouraging and supporting our young people and strengthening our nations. Dave, we're so grateful for your time, your dedication, your friendship, and in particular, your generosity for all those passions. After witnessing Dave at work in the massive lobby we did to get in place the guardians in this room, I told you the story about him squirreling his coffee yesterday. And at home, you can be rest assured that they have no fiercer or more persuasive advocate than Dave Porter to realize your dreams and ambitions. We love you, Dave, and now we want to present you with a short video so some of your friends and admirers could share how they feel about you too. Well, your coffee's there. Of course it is. I guess you don't need to squirrel it at Alan's house. So with no further ado, let us present this video for you.
Of who we are part of the land and it's part of us. As Kaska people, we want to see these landscapes managed in the right way. We've referred to this area as Dene Kusan.
Dene Kusan spans 40,000 square kilometers, an area larger than Vancouver Island. Working in partnership with Crown governments, we propose a formal agreement to protect this land. This will make Dene Kusan.
Sorry about that. That's the wrong video.
But
that is Dave's beautiful booming voice. So we'll just give it a moment for them to load the correct video. We apologize for this, Dave. It's been a generally good event, but you know, technical issues happen.
When you say c'est la vie?
I remember when I was growing up, he definitely seemed a lot larger than life.
He always asks us as his children to learn to give what we value and honor the most in our lives to others.
I know how much he did.
We can do this. Just bear with us for a second. This is worth the wait, I promise.
I know Valerie can sing.
No, you don't want to hear my singing voice, Dave. That's a sin. Yeah. Dave, just so you know, there's 350 people in this room that are just on bated breath to see this. And see, there's Norma waving at you there. It's been a wonderful couple days so far. And we've had a good couple days. The award ceremony last night, Jared Kwok, honoring him. I don't know if you've had a chance to catch some of the proceedings here, but your the work that you've done and the legacy that you've left is really just so visible and present in this room right now. So I hope that that you're feeling the love despite the virtual experience that you're having. So we'll just hopefully soon be able to present that. The lights are so bright up here.
We can't waste this time. It's precious time. And I remember I went to China with Dave, and we traveled, went to 5 different cities, and you know, the Leadership Council in British Columbia did some amazing work. What wasn't mentioned was Dave set up the New Relationship Trust, or it was his vision and his leadership, his strategic work, and that raised $100 million for the new relationship between First Nations and the government of British Columbia, and by association, British Columbians. The Leadership Council, it was through bringing together these different political views that all wanted the same thing for our people, but they came together, exercised a tremendous amount of political discipline, and now the resources supporting education, economic development for the grassroots, for the over 200 First Nations in British Columbia is profound. And stories of Dave's contribution are huge. And in my view, I'm just buying time for our technicians. You just signal when you're done there. Dave, you're a titan to us, to me. You know, he's been a role model and a leader. And I know that, you know, he cares deeply about our people. And the greatness of the man isn't only a great Kaska, but a great Indigenous person that has been a champion of Indigenous people from coast to coast to coast. The leadership of this country recognize him, his strategic leadership, but he's also very funny and kind and sympathetic and empathetic. You know, going through all of the things that he went through. He's one of us. You know, last night we had the opportunity to honor the Governor General, and we blanketed the Governor General because we know that in her role, she sort of represents us. In fact, she is us, as Dave is us. And so many of our leaders exemplify and represent the spirit, intent, and vision of who we are. And we want to take this opportunity to hold up this man, the spirit of the beautiful intention that even though we have gone through so much collectively as a people, it's a powerful reflection of the resiliency in the face of all of these challenges that we have collectively gone through. And we exercise our own way of manifesting our will. And Dave has risen and not for his own personal ambition, but right back to that whole value and ethic that we have about we are all connected, and that circular nature of our relationship, and that nature of reciprocity. And that is the secret sauce of our lives, because that is the regenerative nature of who we are and what we stand for and what we want to do through this work. And Dave was a critical part of laying the foundation with Miles and Ethel and all of the other senior advisors doing this work, because it's in their hearts and in their minds. And to park the egos for the higher good, for the interest of our people, has been profound and powerful, and so much work has gone on behind the scenes to create the space to do the advocacy for who we are. At a time we've got to remember our journey, at a time when racism was in your face, and for people to step up and create the counter narrative to say, no, I reject what you're projecting on me. I know I come from good people. I know my people have a significant contribution, have made a significant contribution, and will make a significant contribution. And that, in my view, is the manifestation of Dave Porter. Sushchi, Black Bear Sanu. That's the brother's name, his Kaska name. Thank you for all you have done, and I hope that video is ready.
"30 seconds out." You know, Dave, I'm just going to take the opportunity because you've been an incredible mentor to me personally. And I love getting those 10:38 p.m. texts. Your share of blues videos and all the great music that the way you check in, and the way that you just are undenying about the work that we're doing and the championship that you are. So thank you for that. And I'm told we're ready. Let's go.
Some people are referred to as a force of nature. He's a force of Indigenous people within Canada, and been a very powerful force.
He's very thoughtful in what he says and what he does. And it's always very strategic and funny.
He's made me a better man, just simply by example, by leading by example.
He was able to convince people to do things that they wouldn't have otherwise done because of his passion for the land and the people and the animals.
I remember, I can still see him, so young and fit and lean and in 20 years old and Hollywood handsome and full of life and energy and very smart.
During our land claims negotiations, and yeah, just a booming voice of a very knowledgeable leader. And when he spoke, everyone listened for sure.
I think he was a teacher without really knowing it, and people were learning from him. They were learning, how to be proud of what you are and what you do.
And he doesn't take over. That's the thing. He guides you through it. He doesn't say, oh, well, I need to be in charge of this.
He has always made sure that young Kaska people are proud to call themselves Kaska.
There's been times where I felt down and out of the blue at 10:30 at night. I'll get a text message from Dave. Hey, how are you doing, young man?
He's got this memory of an elephant, right? So he can tell stories and remember people's names and just, joke.
He transformed the way in which the people in the Yukon tried to deal with issues of wildlife, fish, game, lands management, water management, and so forth, by bringing in a system of co-management.
He's been very instrumental in having the mining industry and the governments that authorize them recognize and deal with Indigenous peoples in their territories as they carry on their activities.
And it really is because of people like Dave that we get to celebrate in recognizing that there's over 120 land guardian programs, or recognizing that IPCAs are a globally understood way of conserving lands and waters.
Dave has a really amazing history as a leader.
And so his impact in my life has been profound. And my understanding of the areas that he opened up for me allowed me to do a better job of kind of bringing me along on the journey that is the life of Dave Porter.
And it's, you know, he's a pretty remarkable man. We're pretty lucky to have him.
I would say Kleko, Wallace, Guyasaka, Dave, for Karen and loving all of us as human beings and all that's around you.
What he has to do is not finished yet, and he will continue to work hard to represent those interests.
I love Dave from the bottom of my heart. I'd walk over hot coals and volcanoes for the man, and he would do the same for me.
Dave, you're getting a standing ovation here. Cameraman, can you show the room, please? Can you scan the room? This short few-minute video doesn't do justice to the incredible impact that Dave has had with advocating for our people. I really think that we need to do a feature-length film on Dave's life. I kind of really went off script earlier, but I'm gonna read a few high points as well. Dave's work over the years has had an international component, from negotiating the Canada-US Porcupine Caribou Agreement while in cabinet to protect this critically important herd and its habitat, to leading a joint Canada-US delegation in a public campaign to create awareness in the European Union and its member governments of Indigenous rights, which included the right to harvest and commercially trade in fur products. That work by Dave and others in the 1990s to counter the influence of the anti-fur lobby has over time created the environment for young Indigenous designers from across the country to proudly show their fashions inspired by meaning, materials for the land and their cultures on the runways at home, as well as in New York, Paris, and Milan. Knowing Dave means at one time or another to have indulged him in sharing his admiration for his life of the long hero Genghis Khan, and even perhaps a very distant family connection to the great Mongolian warrior chief. It should come as no surprise that Dave made it a mission to meet and get to know the Mongolian ambassador to Canada to learn more of his hero and share our work about the Guardians movement across Canada. When told of his tribute, Ambassador Yadma asked if he could share a few words to also honor Dave. And his note reads as follows, quote, "It is my honor to pay tribute to David, my first Indigenous friend whom I met in Vancouver, Canada long ago. He aided in my understanding that Indigenous peoples respect a deep spiritual connection to the land. The love of the land is deeply ingrained in Mongolian nomad culture as well. Both Mongolian and Indigenous peoples have had a deep connection to nature, or have a deep connection to nature, with a profound respect for the environment and a belief in the interconnectedness of all things. We share the same traditions of stories, songs, and histories passed down from generation to generation. All these have been felt well during every meeting with David. Thank you so much, David, for your strong bond of friendship, the ambassador. Fine sentiments I know deeply shared by the people in this room. Thank you. And now I'd like to hand it over to Ethel Blondin Andrews, Honorable Ethel Blondin Andrews. Sorry.
David, it's such an honor to pay tribute to you. And I want to say in my language, Sre Gucha Naiga Alaneta, Sre Gucha Nezon Nahega Kete Kaneo, Ediri Nenega Kola, Sre Nezoneja. Dave, you've put us on the map by giving us the words to speak for ourselves. You've worked very hard for all of us. And we want to thank you for that. We say masicho. Sugasanala is how the Kaska say it, right? And masi, and no one can give expression to our lives and to who we are as our children can. We have a nice little surprise for you in the words of your children. Here it is.
I remember when I was growing up, he definitely seemed a lot larger than life.
He always asks us as his children to learn to give what we value and honor the most in our lives to others.
I know how much he deeply cares about the Kaska and all other Indigenous communities he works with.
That has always also been a really big thing for my dad. We need a healthy connection to the land. And I think that's really inspired, just not myself, but a countless number of young people.
He's a person that you can count on to be there for you when you have nowhere to go.
One of the things I'm most proud of is how much he's overcome and how brilliant of a person he is.
He's always has a story to tell, so his charisma is always on display.
My dad is the best storyteller I've met.
My father's best advice was probably given to me when I was in a bad situation. He said, let the bullshit fly.
Defeat your opponent with kindness if you have to. And my dad always had that ability. And I think I learned a lot from that.
And he's always taught me where I come from and Kaska values. And I'm deeply appreciative of that. And I live my life with those values.
And I'm really glad that projects like this are recognizing his efforts, and it's going to be it's going to mean a lot to him, and it means a lot to our family as well.
I am thankful to be his daughter and to have witnessed the accomplishments he has fulfilled in his lifetime.
Anyways, love you, Dad.
So brother, we invite you to share some words with the people that have gathered and that are honoring and holding you up.
Before Dave starts, I'd like to just say how honored Pete and I are to share this moment with Dave and to recognize his accomplishments as a leader and as someone who cares deeply about the land and all our relations. Madhu.
Turn me loose here. Hello, Guardians. Good morning, I think, still, and good afternoon to you gathered in Ottawa. I'm speaking to you from the unceded traditional lands of the Stolo Nation. This has come as a complete surprise to me. I kind of got the inkling that things were in the works with the way people were whispering to each other, but I'm immensely honored and thankful for the recognition that you've bestowed upon myself today. And as usual, it's never an individual that makes progress in the kind of changes that I've been a part of. It's always the team of people that you work with, the community, the nation, and in this instance, you, the Guardians that are gathered in Ottawa. I'd like to personally extend my thanks to Valerie, Ethel, and as well to Frank for the kind words that you've expressed here today about me personally and the work that I've been involved with. And I would like to pay, upon reflection, homage to the ILI team. The Indigenous Leadership Initiative has emerged as a leading voice in this country on Indigenous-led conservation. And Val, you're right, in a very short period of time, we've made significant changes. We've had tremendous impact through the Guardian movement. And it is a movement. And it's my view that with the leadership supporting and mentoring yourself, Valerie, that this organization will play a significant role in the future, not just here in Canada, but in my view, throughout the globe. And I hopefully can add my views and support to that work going ahead. In addition to my colleagues on the ILI team, thank you very much for your support. So one of the best organizations I've ever worked with, there's no time for egotistical fights, no time for division. It's a group of people that are gathered together with a real purpose. And that purpose is reflected in the Guardians movement that has been established. And I would like to say a few words to the Guardians that are gathered in Ottawa. I think that there's a new term that has evolved, and that's the idea of eco-colonialism. I think that gone are the days when someone can fly up from Toronto arrive in one of our magnificent forests on the West Coast, stand on a stump and tell us that they're there to save us, save our people and our resources, because we have found our voice. We will and should not no longer tolerate others speaking on our behalf. And I see the Guardians as the body that will ensure that they support, as Miles continuously reminds us, our nations, and that they play a role to support our leaders and our elders and clear the way, provide the information for our voices, not only to be heard, but to be in the room when decisions are made on our lands and with respect to our resources and our waters. And you, the Guardians, are the people that are going to achieve that vision and to establish and shout out from the highest mountains the fact that Indigenous peoples and their lands are alive, we're well, and we're here to protect our lands. There's a couple other pieces of information you need to create, not only the space to do your work, but you need the resources to do this work. And I think we should be talking about seeking a trust fund, as we've talked about, a significant trust fund in the billions. When we set out to do this work, the initial work, we were targeting $500 million. And our objective is to have a Guardians initiative in every program of this country. Well, we surpassed the $500 million mark in terms of the resources that we've been able to raise. And so I think that, and I think you need to talk to the leadership, and there should be no more agreements between our governments and crown governments without provision, language, commitments in those agreements to support the Guardians movement and to construct Indigenous protected conserved areas. And as well, there should be in any agreements with the resource sector, socioeconomic participation agreements, IBAs, there must be a clause in every agreement going forward that provides resources to enable the Guardians program to be more effective in realizing their sacred work. You are doing sacred work. You're doing the Creator's work. And the last time I had the opportunity to speak to you was pre-pandemic in Ottawa. We were at the Lord Elgin. And when I spoke there, I said to you at that time that the most important meeting that was being held in Ottawa that day was the gathering of Guardians. And I reaffirmed my perspective on that. And I've said in that presentation, our communities need Guardians. Our nations need Guardians. Our governments, our country needs governments. The global community needs the work of Guardians. And so I wish you well in moving forward. And I haven't checked out yet. So as my friend Victor Matander says, I'm still going to be around and provide advice where it's needed. So in conclusion, I'd like to thank my brothers, Alan Azurza and Peter Stone, to be standing beside me today to witness this acknowledgement. They are my brothers for life. And it's really interesting. We were all born in the same community. And we've been working together for many, many years. And so it's a real honor for them to be here to witness and to support me. And as well, I'd like to thank Alan's wife, Gwen, who is in the room with me. And she has been a very supportive person for decades. And as well, Yvonne Prince, who's my assistant, who provides for me to be able to be on time, engaged, and well briefed for these events. And a very new friend that I've met and I have a tremendous amount of respect for, Nima Hosavi. And that video of my children really was special. And I really want to thank all those that contributed to the video. And Melody, a special thanks to you and all the work that you've done in my association over the decades of having your support and your support, not only for myself, but for the tremendous battle, the battles that we've waged with outside forces such as governments and industry to ensure that the Indigenous people's voices are heard, that our cultures, our identities, and our right to be self-determining people are recognized and implemented. And a shout out to John Horgan for making a decision to bring UNDRIP into effect here in British Columbia in recognition of those battles. Those battles are yet before us, but I can't think of a better group of people that I'd like to go to war with. That's you. Masi, Nadu, Sugasanla, Kanasatazi.
Thank you very much, Dave. And with this ceremony, you are now an honorary lifetime guardian, an honor that is shared by very few. In fact, they're shared by only 3 other people in this world. You witnessed last night, the Governor General, of course, but also Buffy St. Marie, the late Dave Corshane Jr., as well as David Suzuki. So you're in great company. And thank you again for everything that you've done and you will continue to do for this movement. Thank you.
To the Universal Guardians.
Great tribute to our brother Dave Porter. Progress and change comes from communities and nation. I took note of what he said. And this Guardian movement is definitely here to stay and evolve, and thanks to champions like Mr. Porter. For the next part of our agenda, so we're going to have breakout sessions. The group that's going to be here in this room, Guardians and Enforcement in this ballroom with availability of translation. And then in rooms on floor C, how to build a Guardian program, room Frontenac, and Guardians and Water Monitoring in the room Richelieu. And then you will take a break, and then a second set of smaller groups will happen, and innovative models for governance and financing in this room, caring for caribou and moose in room Frontenac, and Guardians, drones and data, room Richelieu, to end our day at 4:10, and you're free for supper for tonight. Alors, let's please go into those rooms and have a great afternoon. Bon après-midi.
Hello, everybody. We will be ready to start this panel in a few minutes. So if I can have my panelists coming over to the stage, that would be great. Thank you. Great. So we just feel free to present from there or from the podium. Yeah. Of course, people they see you better there as you wish. Okay. So I would just make a quick introduction and then there was you all present each other, and then I will give you the all the mics on. Hello, everybody. So ready to start? This session is called Guardians and Enforcement. We have three great presenters on stage with us. I will ask them to introduce themselves in a minute. They will they have it's two groups and they have both of them a presentation to make to you. And when this is done, we will have the opportunity to take questions from the audience. So I would really like to maybe give a small introduction of what the session is about. You might know that some Guardian programs are exploring how to enforce community laws and regulations. And so the session today is about hearing from Guardians getting trained as certified enforcement compliance officers, and talk about hurdles that program face along the path to enforcement responsibilities. So we have new programs and a bit older programs to present you. Rodney, for instance, is going to be talking to you for the very first time about that subject. So because it's a new thing, so we will have good perspective of the challenges and the opportunities coming from this way of implementing the Guardians. The Guardians context and implementation on the land. So just first of all, if you can, I'll start actually. I am Jean-Philippe Messier. I am one of the advisors for ILI and very, very glad to be here today. And so if Rodney would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello, my name is Rodney Peruabno. I'm the coordinator of operations for the EOSG Land Keepers Wildlife Protection Assistance. So we're based about 400 kilometers from here to maybe about 1,000 kilometers north. So I do work on the northern part of Quebec and western. You know. So that's where we work out of.
Thank you, Rodney. Bruce.
Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Lula. I'm a Saskatoon Ranger from Hunter-Queen First Nations from the central interior of British Columbia. I've been a ranger for about going on 10 years now, since 2014 after our title win.
Good afternoon. My name is Jimmy Harry Jr. I'm from the Chilcotin Nation. I am a TNG Ranger. I was a wildland firefighter for 10 years for the BC government. And then I went on to work for Henny for a year. And then after that, I joined the TNG Rangers, which I've been here for about 10 days or about 10 more days. It'll be 5 years. Our Chilcotin name actually refers to as people of the river.
Thanks very much to each of you to have presented yourself. So let's get started and open your ears. You will have the chance to ask questions as soon as both presentations are over. So Jimmy, if you would like to start, the floor is yours.
Okay, I would like to introduce us myself, Bruce, and 4 other rangers. We have 4 rangers in 3 different zones in our area. And Bruce is of the Tidelands. His Tidelands are in his, and we started the program in 2014. As at that time, I was still a firefighter, and now we've evolved from one community was a Guardian Ranger program, evolved into a whole nation as part of the Guardian Ranger program. And yeah, we split our zones up into 3 zones, which consist of 2 rangers each. And that's our introduction to the Rangers. Again, unless Bruce would like to add more.
Yeah, when we started in 2014 as a result of the Tideland rights case, only one in Canada, we actually own 1,700 square kilometers of our own land that we got back. And right now the federal government, BC government have no jurisdiction over our lands anymore. And we were hired to have a presence on our land, to talk to non-Indigenous hunters, not to enter our land for the purpose of hunting.
And earlier on, we heard a term, assertion, not permission. And we got a little story of our own assertion and not permission. As we were trying to get funding for this program, the government just kept touching on it for like 5 minutes and pushing it off till the next year and saying, talk about the next year. And then our chief, Joe from Anaheim, had enough of like short little talks about it. And he went out with some machines, got some people that operate machines and pulled cattle guards and dug up access routes to our natural resources. And then from there, the government decided to open their ears and eyes and take our program serious. This slide I spoke on earlier. We are divided into 3 territories, well, 3 zones. It's 1 territory, and the 3 territories consist of 6 communities, and we all divide into 3 zones and 3 teams of rangers of 2, and yeah. This is you, Jessica.
So and we can see that like the red part on the slide, that's our Tideland rights case win that we won in 2014. And on outskirts of it, you see the Dasyko Park that protects the headwaters of all the rivers that go into our territory, and to protect the salmon run, and to protect all our deer migration routes, and to stop all mining and logging companies from taking all out our natural resources.
They see the left one. So if you want them to see the
Oh, okay. The Chilcotin Rangers' additional responsibilities to improve understanding through research and integrations of knowledge in Western science and traditional knowledge. We help out our DFO, or we help our fisheries team with stories from our elders to let them know where their spawning routes and spawning grounds, as like there are some spawning grounds that they did not know about, and then we give that information to actual fisheries fisheries biologists, and then they know where to work for that kind of studies and water quality tests, and to monitor Chilcotin land, water and air, and existing laws, policies are in effect of protecting our land. NEN actually means land in our language. And to support conservation and restoration led by TNG communities and promoting values and explore ways to build our program.
So this is just what I was talking about earlier about our title land in the red and outskirts in the green is the Desco proposed park. And the totem pole you see there was made by, what is his name down here? Like Tim Wells of the Nuja Nation of Vancouver Island. Don't really know the backstory of that, but they brought it all the way up and put it up on our traditional territory.
The totem pole was placed on a place we call Fish Lake, Tefton Bay. And that was a lake that was proposed for mining, and our nation fought for the right to decline that, and we won that at like 2 years ago. They can no longer like put in any proposals to mine that lake. That lake is like 60,000 wild trout, and they wanted to like remove the water and mine it. And now we have won it as of 2 years ago. They can no longer put any proposals to mine that lake. And as Bruce was talking about, Desico is a proposed traditional park, and it protects the headwaters that contribute to our rivers and streams and oceans with our fish bearing, and it's also the salmon route and migration for our salmon. So, the story on that totem pole, I believe it was placed there, was gifted by the Vancouver Island and nation on Vancouver Island, but it was placed there to like watch over the lake.
So next slide, you can see the declared title lands, which we won back in 2014. Started all in 1989 when we stopped the logging company from coming into our territory. And that's where we started to have talks about protecting all of our land for our own use, so we can keep all the loggers, miners out and just keep it pristine so people can come and see it. So if you look on Google Maps, all around our territory, you can see where the logging encroachments are, all the mining companies. So we're trying to just keep our land pristine.
The court case for the declared title lands, which we won in 2014, which is considered private land owned by the nation of the Chilcotins now. It's just 1,700 square miles. And the court case was filed in 1998, and it started in 2002, but there were other arguments before then, and which the Hennequateen community of our Chilcotin Nation, they in 1998, or no, I think it was like 89, they got an agreement and to leave their trap lines alone for 5 years, and to help our declared title lands, we give thanks to our grandparents, because we have elders and grandparents from our communities who served as professional witnesses to help win the declared title land case of like where we hunted, where we lived back a long time ago, and what we used the land for. And those are our huge contributions to our title land case.
So on the history of the title rangers, when we started in 2014, we started that fall. Just there's 2 access points. This is the north access point on this slide here, and there's another access point at Davidson Bridge, and we manned those bridges like 10-hour days, 7 days a week, and used our own personal vehicles and drove all over our territory, like 1,700 square kilometers, and all the back roads, just checking for hunters and educating them on why we need to keep them out and to preserve our wildlife. And we have a cabin, North Chilco, that. So this cabin here and on this slide here, before this, about 3 years ago, it was like a smaller cabin that DFO had about 20 years earlier, bat riddled and mouse in there. So they tore that down and built us a brand new cabin by Zerntel Timber Frames out of Williams Lake.
The history of the old cabin, it was privately owned, which the owner gifted it to the Chilcotin Nation. And they said he wanted to gift that cabin to someone who protects the land. And so he gifted it to the Chilcotin Nation. And now that's how we acquired that little piece of land in North Chilco.
Okay, so on the slide here, you can see all our equipment, like we have side-by-sides now and a lake boat, so we can patrol Chilco Lake. Okay, and we're gonna move on here.
And part of moving forward, it takes 180 credits from the university, which we are working on, and it's a chosen classes of our own. So we need 180 credits so we can get a diploma from the university, and from there we can start working with the conservation and getting the conservation authorities and what they require for us to obtain authority on our land.
So on this slide here, you can see a picture of Chilco Lake. And on the others, with the helicopter there, we sometimes do goat counts, sheep counts, and moose counts with a white saddle air out of Bluff Lake.
We work with wildlife biologists with caribous, cougars, and grizzly bears, and they get us to take hair samples, scale samples from fish, and just a general count of population and stuff like that.
So as in the next two slides, it's just a couple of slides of our brief history of our Chilco Lake watershed and stuff. And this is our daily duties. You can see we do
danger tree assessing for the provincial parks, and we also clear their trails, and we do DFO joint patrols with conservation officers, natural resource officers, and Department of Fisheries and Oceans. This is our partners in work, and also where we get funding is from the British Columbia government, which are the natural resource officers and conservation officers in Fisheries and Oceans Canada, BC Parks and Transport Canada. And some of the symbols on the thing are from our bands, from Estela, Plesco, Unicitine, Tletinco, Sidel, and Henny Guatine. And the very top middle is our TNG logo. And to the left of that is the Henny Guatine logo, which community is Bruce from. Working with the TNG Fisheries Department, as you guys see, there's another Guardians and Water Monitoring, which is happening in another room. We also work with them, and we use what they call YSIs, which detects of the pH level and oxygen in the water. Basically, it's checking how healthy our rivers are for our fish and the quality of life of fish in the river it can produce. And we use flow trackers, which just flows the amount. Our flow trackers measures the amount of water going through our river systems and streams. And usually these are based around our salmon migration route and spawning grounds.
And we have a new hatchery that we just set up on the Hansville site, and we're just starting off with trout burst because our steelhead population is way down. I think the last time they counted 5 steelhead in our river from like 20,000 years before. So trying to figure out why we're losing all our steelhead.
This is just an example of our daily duties. We do joint patrols with DFO. One of our most person that's interested in always working with us is DFO officer Anthony Neville, who moved on to become a conservation officer. So we can expect him to make some calls and want to work with us still. We do steelhead patrols, we do ice fishing patrols and river and lake patrols. Next one. Oh, well, he missed it, but there was a map in the past that we just in the previous slide, we just got that one that this year, there is no, the red part of the map is we just won that this year. It's no more mineral exploration by minings around surrounding our salmon spawning grounds and migration routes.
And we have 5 permanent water monitoring stations, 3 around Honey and 2 on the Chilcotin River, just to we can detect water levels and the water temperature and water quality and quantity. And we do minnow trapping for coho. And earlier we had a new fish hatchery.
The work that Bruce just spoke about is for fisheries biologists. This is surrounding moose management, and an example of a place that we want to protect is called the Rocky Point, which is a high population of moose and very good moose habitat. And we are using access management, and right now, until we get permits to deactivate other roads, we plan on deactivating access routes into these areas that do not have permits for their roads. And it's to help with the declining moose population. And we have MOUs with the conservation officers and co-moose management agreements with the BC government. This a thing of our patrols, those are NROs, and we are in Relay Creeks looking at ATV trails coming into Chilcotin traditional territory, and we're seeing if it comes into our, and the worry is about hunting in our territory. Maybe my example, maybe might be poachers. To the photo to the right in it is an example of an NRV violation. Someone had put their machine on a dam that was created to help the wildlife like ducks and fish. It's a watershed, and that we had to do a observe, record, report on that to the natural resources. And to the left is a hike, one of our duties we get to do twice a year, clear the trails and danger tree assess the trails for parks, BC parks.
And we do all this on a tablet where we have survey 1, 2, 3 on it, and we can record all this information down, and we send it off to our supervisor, then sends it off all to the right agencies that can help us take care of all this stuff.
As for compliance enforcement, right now we had limited authorities between myself and one of our other workers, Corbett Johnny. He's in the crowd. We went to the Guardians training in 2019, January to February, right? And we had limited authority, but other than that, for compliance and enforcement, we just use observe, record, report using apps on our survey 1, 2, 3, which is natural resource violations, the RAP line, and VORR, which goes directly to the people who handle those kind of reports of natural resource violations or poaching and stuff like that.
Okay, so on this next slide is the examples of our daily activities. Have a ranger cabin, as we talked about earlier. and we patrol North Chilco. All the lodges over there, they have bear viewing days and fishing tenures, and we do rafting, and we do patrols on the river with a jet boat to make sure everybody's in compliance. And we do boat safety training.
For the months of September and October is the spawning season when the sockeye and Chinook arrive at the spawning grounds. And at that time is our grizzlies show up. And that's one of our main things we do then is to make sure to limit the viewing of bears. So that way the bear viewers don't chase the bears off, so they can get their winter feed in before the winter settles in.
And then at the same time, we also tag grizzlies. I think we tagged about 11 so far, just to see where they hibernate and where they move around throughout the season.
This is just more certificates and training.
There's all the training that we do, like
It's based around our duties and the safety of our job. Our goal is to have stable funding for future and long-term employment and uphold provincial, federal laws, policies that support non-stewardship, improve Chilcotin knowledge and capacity by equal partners in land stewardship. And that is the end. Sachanal, thank you from the Chilcotin Nation. And for more information or contacts, we have a website there. And if you want any more information, we can contact our manager who is in BC right now at 250-392-3918. His name is Paul Brander. We open to questions.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Jimmy and Bruce. You definitely had a lot to say. There's a very complete program, great inspiration for us all. Thanks for the presentation. We'll take the questions for all the presenters at the end. So I would really like to now give the floor to Rodney that doesn't have a PowerPoint presentation, but we'll just speak either from, as you wish, from there or from the podium.
Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Rodney Parwabano. I don't have a presentation with me. I was supposed to be here with Nadia Shagnas, who can't make it today on family reasons. So she works with our Cree Nation government here in Quebec. Yeah, so anyways, I'll just I guess explain a bit of who we are and what we do, and we do have two hats, two roles to play in our territory, and one of them is EUSG land keepers. So it's basically what the Guardians are doing, and the other one is wildlife protection assistance. So with that, we do work with Quebec government with that. So we are the assistants to wildlife protection officers. So we do have powers to give infractions to non-natives that are coming into our territory. So any fishing or hunting that they're doing. So, but then again, there are only four field workers right now, and it's a pretty vast territory that we do have to work with and to patrol. As you see all these maps there, I wish I can have my map here too to show you how big our territory is. But we do touch with the Innu territory on the east side of Quebec. So we're kind of almost right in half there in the province of Quebec. Innu is on the east side and we're on the west side. And the Inuit are on the north side. So anyways, with let me get this. Yeah, so anyways, in our territory, there's an increase of development, increase of access into our territory. So with this program that we have is it's a pilot until pilot project, I guess you call it, until 2024. So with that, we are planning to get 19 more assistants to be on the land. So which is going to be really good. And it's going to be a big department for us, and a lot of eyes on our territory, and even surveillance of through enforcement, I guess, to do because we do live with our close towns. There's 4 towns that are close to in our territory too. And we do have 9 communities. So right now we do work with one inland. It's our community is called Mistissini. So that's where I'm based. And I have one guy here, Willie Loon, that was here with me yesterday. And I have another, the other guy works out of Sheshabe. So it's along the coastline of James Bay. And George Head is here. Both of them are sitting at the back. And the other 2 couldn't make it. One of them is doing our traditional hunt for Canada goose, I guess. And the other one is keeping the fort in Sheshabe. So his name is Harry House. And the other one that's in Mistissini, who's hunting, is Benoit Lonchab. So we do reporting too and monitoring. And we do work with our Cree Nation government. So we do have our own government in here in Quebec. So with that, we do have the environment department in there. So we do work with them. So we have our own biologists and forestry technicians too. So we do work with them, mining too. So there's a lot of support in our department. And it's pretty big too. Sometimes I get lost with them too, but which is good, you know. It's better to get lost in our department than out there on the land, you know. So anyways, and the other thing too is right now with I've heard a lot of people that speak about their territories and their lands and what they face. And it is true, you know, with all the indigenous people, we do work with our own traditional values, you know, those are very important to carry. And even with our own, amongst people back home, when we do use those traditional values, when we have 7 of them that we follow, and when we use those, it helps us to ground ourselves, you know, because these days we have cell phone, internet, things are so fast, you know, and sometimes we get lost in there, you know. But the important thing is, I've heard people saying our Mother Earth is very important, you know, and we have to stay grounded with our Mother Earth. And it's very to us, it's important, you know, like here are some of our traditional values that we do follow. As one of them is courage, you know, to have the courage to while we're on the land, you know, honesty, humility, compassion, respect, and to share with our land, with our own people, you know, and wisdom. I think those are the important traditional values for us up north when we do our job, you know. And even with my 4 workers we are certified to be conservation assistants though, but and again, there are parts that we can do and there are parts that we can't, but protecting our territory is, we do have some things to, some powers, and so with that, we've, like I said, I think we're going on our 3rd year with this pilot project, and with that, the experience that the workers have, the field workers, is amazing. How much they get respect from non-Indigenous people when they approach them. When we wear our vests, we do have our other. Right now, this is how we dress. But when we see non-Indigenous people, we do have our own vest that Quebec provided for us, that we took that certificate course, and we do have that. Each year we have a 1-week course, intensive course with that. So with that, it helps us to monitor our territory. So with that, and again, it's for me, I think it's very unique, working with the environment, working with our Taliman, and I know somebody said it's family trap lines, so but we call them Taliman. And so anyways, it's very unique, and it's nice to and I am proud to say that these guys do good job. But then again, there's only 4 of us, and hopefully by next year we will have 19. So I know Nadia and them are working, and my leadership are working to get those the other 19 workers. And it is important, even when we do our patrols on our territory, is to protect the land. It's one of the most important things. I know we do face with a lot of mining and a lot of forestries, so it's a lot to I guess to report. And I guess I can say I'm blessed to say our leadership are doing their job to work with governments and to stop some of these things, or to they do know what they do. So anyways, but for us, it's the main things are to protect our rivers, lakes, and the conservation too. It's very important to I guess to plant that seed with our own. And I've heard people here yesterday and today too, is our youth are very important. It's very important to put those seeds. I know here in this conference, we're working and doing our job, but it is important to go back home and to plant those seeds. Water those the seeds that we're planting. It's and for them to grow. And I know some of our own people, I'm pretty sure you guys can relate. Our people sometimes see our the way of their hunting, or the way of living in a different way, but I think for us, we really need to grow with the way our ancestors were living in our past. So it's a lot of work for us to work with our with the people and youth. So even this coming year, when we developed this program, it was during the COVID pandemic, so it was harder for us to grow. And this past year, actually this month or last month in March, 2 months ago, was our first full year that we opened up, because before, during the pandemic, we couldn't go into the communities or our towns, because when we returned to our own communities, we had to isolate, so it's so it was a little tough, but I'm glad we've we've passed that, and like again, seeing these guys from BC and them how far they've gone, and I'm really, I'm pushed with that, and inspired too, to see other provinces in our nation, in this nation, that what they're doing, hopefully one day we will be there, and well, we are there. And just to say that I am very inspired by the speakers that we have this past 2 days, and this morning too, and I think with developing this program helps me, and I'm pretty sure my colleagues here we're pushed to achieve more, so yeah, so, and we do patrol, like I said, protect, monitor, observe, report, enforce the laws with non-natives, inform, educate, and outreach, and we do support our own communities. And I know that's a lot of work. And I seen the awards that were given out here, though. You guys really inspired me, that you guys have a lot of experience, and hopefully we can pass some knowledge to us too. And yeah, so anyways, I think that's those are the things that I wanted to talk about. I know where Nadia wasn't here, and she would have more better explanation of how this program was, and I wasn't there, so I was hired about 2-3 years ago when they started up this program. So for me to conduct, I guess, the operational part is that's my job, and again, I really thank you for everything, and even these guys too, I look up to these guys, just seeing this, and yeah, so hopefully we can, and again, we are all brothers and sisters here, and so with that, I believe we'll see each other again. Hopefully I can bring a presentation next time, and exactly what we do and what we collect, and we do have my guys to have some hurdles too with the language barrier. So I think all 4 of them don't speak French, but they still communicate with the non-native, with the French speaking non-natives. So with that, I am proud of them that they're able to communicate with them, because when they come back to the office, they say, "Hey, Rod, we met with this family, and they didn't speak English, but once when they saw who we were and we introduced ourselves, well, they give us respect," he says, so which is good, So I guess to finish off with this is again, thank you very much for giving us. And again, I wasn't prepared with this. Everything was in my head this morning while I was sitting there. Maybe that's why I'm the only non-native with no hair here, Well, anyways, thank you very much again.
Thank you, Rodney, and we do hope you come over again, and with or without a map, your presentation was very clear. So it was very interesting exchange. It's very nice to see younger programs with older programs. There's another room at this same time about starting up a Guardians program. So there's even people not even started. So this is one of the objective of a gathering like this, to exchange perspectives, challenges, and opportunities among the programs, whatever the phase they are. So now it's time for people in the room to raise their hands and ask questions if you have Any questions about any of the stuff that has been presented by Jimmy, Bruce, or Rodney? The floor is now to you. Yes, I have one hand over there. Is there going to be a mic going around or just? Oh, okay, good, thank you.
Dancy, Skumit Na for your presentation. Thank you very much. Being from Manitoba, the province of Manitoba, northern Manitoba, in regards to the ranger work that you do, the guardian work that you do, in Manitoba, we have a huge problem with the province of Manitoba issuing sporting licenses for fish, tags for moose and caribou, and not consulting with local First Nation groups. And so a lot of times within our traditional territories, during the times when it's fishing and moose hunting and caribou hunting, we'll see either float planes, planes with skis and such coming into our territories with absolutely no consultation with the local leadership or the resource people who manage the areas. And I'm wondering, like, do you run into those sorts of issues where you are, where the province unilaterally issues these types of licenses to either people in Manitoba or even from out of province, and even sometimes from outside the country for especially for moose tags? And the other thing that I wanted to ask is, as a part of your enforcement, you had mentioned that you issue fines and such. So when you have people from outside your territory, that go back to perhaps another province or to urban centers, like how do you enforce issuing those I guess, fines that you do issue? And, do you go through the provincial court systems? Like how is that monitored and such? And is there monies that are tagged to that? And if you do get monies from the fines you have, do they go back into your program? So, and I guess that would be for the full panel. I don't know.
Thank
But
you.
thank
There
you.
Thanks very much. So there was many questions in there. Would one of you feel comfortable to start and answer?
We do run into those problems. As for our North Chilco area, where there is a lot of tourism, about 5 years ago is when we finally started our program, and they weren't used to us and they would not come to the table. But as for issuing of fines, we do not have the authority. I believe they have the authority to give infractions to their, but we use an observe, record, report system, and we report it to DFOs, in which we have direct contact with them, and then we serve as professional witnesses, and we make professional statements in the court in order to get that backed. And as for the moose, we do not have control of our LEHs that go out in our territory, but we do have co-moose management and memorandums of understanding with conservation officers to work together in this. And was there any other questions that I did not get to?
About the fines. So how does the fine system works? Do you get into the provincial court system? How does that work? And where the money of the fine is ultimately going?
We don't know where the money goes, but like I said, we do not have the authority to give tickets. So we just act as professional witnesses when we report this to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans or the Conservation Services. And yeah. And as for the fine thing, maybe he can answer more because he's got the authority to do infractions.
Yeah, for us, we do have the same issues that you guys have, and but then again, like we said, it's we're just starting, and we are starting to hear a lot of these planes that are coming into our territory, and we've worked with our own government, Cree Nation government, and we've told them our issues, what's happening. So for us, is we do have our own police system in our own in our Cree Nation. So we do have our own Cree Nation police. So we do advise them about these planes that are coming. But we do have our category 1 and 2 lands. And on the other, outside of that, we have category 3. And that's where they come up. Well, these planes come and land and go hunting. And with that, we do have SQs, they're provincial police, and we're still working with them and to I guess to let them know where these sightings are. But for them, they are going to be working with the airports around our territory. So if any plane that's coming into our territory, they will know who that is, you know. So but then again, the land keepers, I think all of us are land keepers, guardians. So all the eyes that are on the territory, we do need their help. So right now, as we are here now, we are trying to do our awareness. I think that's the important thing, is to do awareness on these our own people. And again, like I said, you know, to plant the seed in our own youth and our people, is we need to water those and always go check with them and you know, to let them know that this is your territory too, not just us. You know, we work here and we can report, but to help you guys, you know, that's what we are there for. And but when last year we stopped sports hunting on moose, one of our territories well, not territory, one of the zones in our territories. So we stopped that. And again, you know, I think the Kitigan CB chief spoke yesterday and how they fought and all that. And they managed to work with that, you know, and I think we did the same thing. And again, you know, that's the political side, and I cannot really speak for the political side there. But my assistants went and patrolled in that area. So it went well, but then again, you know, non-natives would approach me when I go into our neighbors' towns there. So and again, you know, it's I do have to talk in French too. But a lot of the guys there are like, I worked in the mining too, so they know me, so I know them. So with that, and again, you know, I think it's important that our people to be watered, you know, to grow, you know, in our own traditional ways of hunting, and to protect that, you know, so we don't over harvest to us. So it is very important. So, but then again, when we do infractions there, of course, we work with the game wardens. So we work with the provincial government. So with that, the money goes there. So I guess in the future, we will see what our own Cree government can do with our territory, you know. Hopefully we can have the power and everything and to have the money in our territories.
Thank you. We will have time to one last quick question, or perhaps quick answer. So yeah, over there.
Yeah, so just a quick question about the enforcement training and maybe the distinctions between law enforcement and game wardens. We're looking at establishing a conservation officer program. We already have our own police force, but we're not necessarily sure what the distinction would be and where the lines are going to be drawn in terms of delegating those authorities. So could you speak a little bit more to the enforcement trainings and certifications that you do have, and where those boundaries are with game wardens and with law enforcement?
Well, for us there, we work with the again, the question is a little on the political side there. So with that, if Nadia was here, she would be able to respond to you with the right information. But for as far as I know, that we do. I guess when they negotiated with the Quebec MFFP, they're called the game wardens here in Quebec. Well, in Quebec. So with that, when we hired our workers, they had to go through the conservation officers training. So they gave us training, a 1-week training in, like every year we get this training, how to give out the infractions, how to approach people. And with that, I think it's in each province, it's probably different. So I think it's better for your own chief, I guess, or I don't know how it works. But for us, is we have our own government here in Quebec. So they're the ones that negotiated that with the MFFP. So I think I don't know if that answered your question.
There's a complimentary answer.
As for ourselves, we are from BC, and to obtain authority, actual authority that is granted from the British Columbia government, our co-manager, Scott Thompson, if you want to ask him some questions about that, he's right there. But he put a plan in place for us to get our authority over our land by BC government, and he reached out to them, and they want us all to get a diploma, which requires is 180 credits, I believe, from a university with your choice of which classes you want to take to affirm that. And then from there, we can move forward into getting authorities and working with conservation and having authority over our land. And that's a future goal of ours.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have. We do have some gifts for our presenters that are coming up. So thank you, all of you three, for your presentation. And Rodney. Bruce. And Jimmy. Thank you very much. We'll add French to your certification list.
Hey, folks, just to let you know that we'll have the next session start at about 3:05. And we'll be discussing innovative models for governance and financing with some great presenters in about 3 minutes. So just, yeah, thanks.
Yep, my sister. Oh, yes, yes. Okay, good to see you. I'm gonna put my own timer on. What's up?
Where would you like to sit?
Oh, I see that right here. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I'm gonna put my own timer on because I just know a little bit more. Okay.
All right. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to this session on innovative models for governance and financing. We have 3 presenters here this afternoon to present on some of their work. Christine Smith-Martin is the Executive Director of the Coastal First Nation. She's a member of the Haida Nation and the, I should have asked you how to, Tsimshian community. She has more than 20 years in past experience as the Executive Director of the Vancouver Aboriginal Transformative Justice Services, and she has a long track record of partnering with conservation groups as well as national and global advocates working to address climate change, salmon conservation, and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Welcome, Christine. We also have Scott Harris, who will be co-presenting with Christine. Scott has been working with the Namwakilas member First Nation since 1996. His work includes developing land use plans, marine plans, and working with the nations on developing their stewardship visions. His current role as the Guardian Coordinator sees him working with the nation's Guardians programs and implementing their stewardship priorities for their territories. Welcome, Scott. And finally, we will have David Flood, who is from the Matachewan First Nation. Okay, great. In Treaty 9 territory. David is currently an Indigenous practicing professional forester in Ontario, who has spent the last 8 years working as the General Manager of the Wahkwatoan Development. He is also one of our senior advisors for the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. So thank you, David. Christine, I'd like to invite you to come up and present.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to put my timer on because I tend to talk a little bit when I get passionate about something. I first want to acknowledge the beautiful territory of Anishinaabe that I'm on. I thank you for welcoming us the other day and look forward to spending some time on your beautiful traditional territories. As she said, my name is Christine Smith Martin. I'm of Haida and Tsimshian descent. My mother comes from Old Masset and my father comes from Lachwalams. And I've been at Coastal First Nations as their CEO for about the last 2.5 years. I'll tell you a little bit about Coastal First Nations. We are a unique alliance, and part of our alliance is built on what is traditionally a part of partnerships that have been there for quite some time. So in all of our coastal communities, as probably the same with your communities, we really relied on each other so that togetherness with each of the coastal communities was just built. That's where is what it was built on with Coastal First Nations. So I wanted to make that very clear that this alliance just didn't start when we started. They actually started many, many, many years before there. Our traditional territories goes as far as Haida Gwaii, which is close to the Alaskan border. We have Central Coast communities, which are Helschek, Kitasoo, Wekino, New Hulk, and we have North Coast communities, Metlakatla, Kitkatla, Hartley Bay. And we have been together in this alliance for over 20 plus years. Our traditional territories are very important to our communities, and they span, as I mentioned, very far and wide. And we are the last remaining temperate rainforest, coastal rainforest in the world. So as you may have heard before, we've had such big agreements as Great Bear Rainforest Agreement, which I'll talk about in a little bit, that provided some funding for the work that happens in our community with our stewardship offices. We have a similar network in our communities. It's called the Coastal Stewardship Network. And the Coastal Stewardship Network provides the Coast Guardian Watchman programs. That's what we call them in our area. Our team is comprised of trainers, developers, facilitators that support our nation's stewardship offices. They include directors, managers, Coast Guardian, watchmen, and other field staff who work amongst our people. It's an important piece of the work that we do. It maintains the rich ecological cultural heritages in our community. Our coastal watchmen have some of the oldest coastal guardian watchmen within them, with lots of wealth of experience in our communities that they share freely with all of our other new communities that have developed their coastal watchmen. we look at the work that they're doing as a modern version of the ancient responsibility of taking care of our territories. And those are connected to a lot of our names, chieftainship, and our responsibilities as it's passed down to generation. Now we're here to talk a little bit about how do we access Guardian Watchman. Oh, thank you. How do we access funding for our Coastal Guardian Watchman program? And our oldest program, I believe, is 30 years old. And one of the pieces that we've been able to do is develop what we call a carbon offsetting program. It's a financing for Guardian Watchman and Stewardship program, goes hand in hand with what we call a forest-based carbon offset. It was negotiated as part of the Forest and Land Use Agreement under our first reconciliation agreement with our provincial BC government over a dozen years ago. It provides to establish a new forest-based carbon offset program in the Great Bear Rainforest. The annual allowable cut to reduce drastically to protect our old growth forests. This generated opportunities for carbon offset. A new protocol was established to make for the marketplace and for the carbon offset protocol. By design, 65% of the revenue from the forest carbon offset protocol program is used to fund and to support the work that's happening with our guardians in our communities. It can be applied to the stewardship work that happens and the guardians. The balance can be used for First Nations needs, but most of our communities use 100% of all revenue that is generated from our carbon offset to fund the stewardship and the guardian work that happens in their communities. Over the past 11 years, over $10 million have been generated and invested into our communities through our stewardship offices and the guardian work that happens. Next, I want to talk about Coast Funds. Coast Funds was established in 2007 out of a mutual recognition by First Nations, conservationists, industry, and government, and some stakeholders in these areas. And as you'll see on the slide, the first slide that we have, Coast Fund works very closely with us and Namacolis and also with our communities. They have established a fund. And this fund was really important to our communities. It really provided the opportunity for us to really be in control of how our funds are distributed. The fund was initially made up of $60 million from private donors. This was the first PFP that they called, $30 million from the government of BC and $30 million from the government of Canada. And they were separated into two different pots. The Coast Conservation Endowment Fund, and this money will be held in permanent trust fund. Every year, income from the trust fund will be spent on work to protect and manage our ecosystems. Examples include research, education, and watchman programs. And we also have another pot called the Coast Economic Development Fund. This money will be held by an Economic Development Corporation. These funds will be spent over 5 to 7 years. Grants will be supported and sustained in the business and economic development area. The Coast Funds, the Endowment Funds, and the Economic Funds are both managed by the Board of Directors. The directors, they're appointed by First Nations and BC governments. And as you will see on this, those are the two funds that we're talking about. Oh, I don't have to strain my neck. Those are the ones that we're talking about. If you could go to the next slide. Well, they're getting the next slide sorted out. We've been able to, through Coast Funds, have really been able to ensure that we just don't have the money that was provided to us. They've been able to leverage a whole bunch of money to provide the funds for our communities to do the work in our communities in the Guardian program. As you can see, this stewardship endowment, we started off with $56 million. Am I not far enough, close enough? Oh, that was my remote. That's my fault. Sorry about that. And we've been able to leverage it, and it's really provided us that tool to not only just sit with the money that we got, we wanted to ensure that we leveraged every opportunity that we can. The impact that we have now, as you can see, has grown from 56 million. We are now at $114 million that provides funding to our Guardian Watchman programs. And that was really Coast Funds, along with our communities, Namacollis and Coastal First Nations communities, really working really hard to ensure that that grows. Same with the Economic Development Fund that started at 60 million and we're now up to 291 million. Lots of leveraging opportunities. We have these dollars, and Coast Funds was able to leverage that. And every year we have payment to our communities. Let me push, I hope I pushed the right one. Oh, I did it. So these are the funding that is provided. There is 18 Guardian programs, and it covers 7 million hectares. From the jobs, there are 1,253 new jobs. That's from our Economic Development Fund. 123 new and expanded businesses. And we've been able to research and restore restoration projects, 389. And then we looked at 75 species, and then 73 projects supporting language revitalization. That was really important to our communities, that this work also incorporates language and cultural revitalization because they go hand in hand. The investment, you'll see the investment that I talked about increasing. And I don't want to take up too much time because my colleague here, Scott, is going to come up and present as well, and I'll be able to answer questions a little bit later. So Scott, I'll pass it off to you. Sorry, turn that off. Yeah, that one. Oh, that one.
Great, we'll just move to the first slide, please. My name's Scott Harris. I'm with Nunnacollis Council, and I've been asked to sit up here with Christine and talk about innovative funding. And so a lot of the work that I do is trying to access funding for the Nation Guardian programs. So do I have to push the button, or is it going to come in a sec? Okay, so I wanted to connect this presentation to Ottawa somehow, and I couldn't figure out quite how, but we did do an interesting project this past year with an archaeologist, and the Guardians were able to do some core sampling work, and we actually had to send the samples to a lab in Ottawa to get them radiocarbon dated. So anyway, I put a photo up there just to show that there was a link to Ottawa somehow. Anyway, the Nunnacollis Council is slightly different from the Coastal First Nations, and I'll get into that in a sec. I'm the coordinator for the Hamayas Stewardship Network, and then we have 6 member nations whose logos are up there. And so I will flip it to the next slide, and I'm going to quickly run through. Did I click it to the next slide or no? Oh, okay, there we go. Sorry, I'm going to run through a little bit about what, oh, I'm looking at French. What Nunnacollis does. So in terms of Nunnacollis, we're regional organizations. We started in 2007, I think that's correct. And then Nunnacollis means a place where we come to agreement. So an interesting word that was chosen to identify what Nunnacollis is. And so Nunnacollis provides a number of services to the member nations, including, looking at these agreements that Christine was talking about, as well as some others. We work on referrals, the development referrals that come in. We also advocate for the nations in a collective manner on regional priorities. Next slide. I'm just going to show you where we're located. So we're in the southern portion of the Great Bear Rainforest, included in the territories of the member nations is Vancouver Island and part of the Central Coast. So we have 6 member nations: the Mamalilakla, the Clawitsis, the Dinakdawa-Witlala, the Wewakai, the Wewakam, and Comox First Nations. So the Hamaya Stewardship Network was started back in 2015 after a number of processes. So the Guardian programs just started about 7 years ago for the member nations, and some Guardian programs have just more recently started. So a couple of things: we've received a small amount of funding from philanthropic organizations to get this started, and then it was determined by the board of directors at Nunwaucolis that Nunwaucolis would not run a Guardian program. It would be the member nations who would do that. And so we have obviously the purpose of what the network is, but the pillars are really key. What is it that our function is? What do we do? And the key pillars, we've got 5 key pillars: governance, funding, training and capacity building, as well as data management, as well as shared experiences like this Guardian gathering that we have. So I'm going to get into the funding and focus a little bit on the funding and the innovative ways that we've been able to do that. So I'm going to start in the middle, the center diagram where the First Nation is. And so they may have a band manager, or they may have a Guardian manager who's good at writing funding proposals. And of course, we all know the all the sort of funds that they can go after. And so that's a difficult one in the sense that Val talked about it yesterday. There might be $25,000 that you can go after, $50,000 you go after, and then you got to report out on each of those. And to get up to that $1 million, Val said, that's quite a lot of grants that you've got to write. So Nunwaucolis, if you look down at the lower box, Nunwaucolis, we're that collective of 6. We're able to do a little bit more in the sense that we have a lands person who deals with mainly forestry. We have a person who deals with the marine. Then we have myself as a stewardship coordinator, actually dedicated to looking for funding, as well as those other pillars that showed. So that allows us to do a number of things. When your nation has only 1 or 2 people working on those funding proposals and then having to report out on them gets difficult. So having a team to help build this is important. Now, how did we go about doing this? Is Christine talked about, the land use plans that we've been involved in, the Great Bear Rainforest, MAP, the Marine Planning Partnership is another one. We work on the nation's land use plans. We work on their marine plans, but the big one that we've done is we've created the stewardship visions with the nation. So each nation has their own stewardship vision. What is it that they want to see in the future? So over the next 10 years, what do you want your stewardship program to look like? Is it 5 people? Is it 20 people? Do you need boats? Do you need trucks? What do you need for your Guardian program? So it's that future thinking. And once we have that, we're able to work, as a collective to go after those things. So we have a number of agreements, and Christine talked about those agreements, like the PFP, like the carbon credits, like the Marine Planning Partnership, that we're able to work with governments and find funding that support those Guardian programs. I wanted to mention the one on partners. So partners is kind of that light blue area. Partners, interesting. You got to be a little bit careful with partners because they want to use you to meet their goals, or we want to use them to meet some of the goals that we have. Or if it's a true partnership, we're in collaboration moving forward. So you have to be very careful with partners. But the one thing that we try to do is we'll write letters of support for partners, or the nations, the member nations will ask them to write letters of support for a specific project that helps the Guardian programs. Second thing we may do is we may ask them to write letters of support for us. So it's a great opportunity to create those partnerships, but make sure that it's your agenda. I wanted to mention the province and the feds. There's all sorts of other funding pots that we go after. So for example, Guardian programs, how come we're going after Ministry of Advanced Education for trying to access funds? And in that case, they're supporting the Stewardship Technician Training Program that Vancouver Island University is putting on for the Guardians, but we're indigenizing those courses and making sure that they meet the needs of the nations and are in community. Transport Canada, the federal government, we're working with them on bathymetry, which is underwater mapping. So there's lots of little pots that we can also go after, but because we're part of this collective, we find out about these different areas. Okay, so instead of me chatting about, all this great work and all the funding that we're able to access, I'd like you to see a video, if I can plug the video up there, and you'll actually hear from the Guardians the importance of this work. So are we able to cue that up?
The Guardians come together twice a year to share stories of the work that they do throughout the year. And the fact that this is done in typically December or the winter, it's no accident. It's very close to, historically how we would organize and spend our time in the winter with the shorter days. So there are other government agencies and other partners that come and give presentations to kind of recap some of the things that took place over the year. But the big excitement around it is the fact that all these different nation programs get to come together and they're able to take pause and reflect on that and share their challenges, their experiences with one another. They are the ones that are on the front lines to ensure that our stewardship principles and values are enforced.
Our Guardians are first line of defense. They're our last line of defense. They're our eyes and ears out there for us policymakers to understand whether the policies we're developing are effective or not. Our Guardians are the litmus test to be able to tell us how practical some of the decisions we've made or how we need to learn to make decisions with a little bit more foresight into them. For far too long, we've depended on other levels of government to provide the oversight in our territories, and it's really left us in a position of disrepair. So our communities have decided to take it upon themselves and grow these programs with our own people from our communities, patrolling these areas like we have for 10,000 years.
The Guardians are very important to us. They're our knowledge keepers. They know the land. They walk on our land. I think it's one of the most important jobs there is in our communities to have.
We're a remote nation that has a lot of territory with very few people in it and very few eyes on what's going on in our territory. So having them out there and keeping an eye on things is important to us.
For thousands of years, there was people just like myself and the other Guardians that were responsible for overseeing the management of their resources. It's great to follow in the footsteps of our ancestors.
You're the driving force. You're that boat that needs to hold everything up. It's up to you to represent properly, to make sure that your leadership's message is sent and in a good way.
The Guardian gatherings are important for the well-being of each individual nation. And I find that they are important for the Guardians to collaborate with each other on things that work well and things that need improvement over time, and understanding our leadership and their decisions on what is a priority to our nation.
It's good to intermingle and discuss what you've gone through that season, because everybody kind of goes through the same experiences, maybe just not the same way.
Just think differently or do something differently, or may have a different idea, and just being able to share those
ideas with any one of them is quite helpful.
I think everyone learns a lot from presentations, specifically when we're doing presentations about new potential projects. It gets the Guardians excited and actually wanting to be involved in these programs.
It's important that we keep these going. This keeps us as one, working together to help preserve and protect our territories. When we get together, it's just a brotherhood. We're all as one, like we're all doing the similar jobs, but we're all together and relaxing now, socializing and talking with one another and sharing different stories. We're just letting our hair down, so to speak, and just being ourselves and not talk about work all the time necessarily. So
For me, the most enjoyable parts of the gathering is just socializing with everyone. That's the biggest thing for me, and I think that's an important thing for us Guardians too, is to always have that good relationship with each other.
I think ultimately we get to just be ourselves and get together and just, break bread, enjoy the time with each other because we are a family.
It's important that people know when we come together here that it's for a reason to make everybody better in this room and to become more professional so we can go out there and build our partnerships and relationships to do a better job and to take the workload off of other people so we can take that on and learn how to take care of our own traditional territory. Not the way they want it done, but the way we feel that it needs to be done.
I think this is a really team building experience for everybody. It's a wonderful thing. We all want the same thing. We're all working towards the same thing.
Seeing people with similar energies or energies that are uplifting is very important to me. It helps my batteries, my internal batteries, be lifted, and it's just exciting.
A deep understanding of their cultural connections to the land, to each other, and the relationships that have existed for thousands of years. It's critically important to the success of these programs for our communities. So this gathering is like a reflection of how you come together and share those stories. The benefits of that are immeasurable.
Being with the other Guardians, it strengthens our connections.
We are on the leading edge of creating solutions for ourselves, for our job, for the world as a whole.
I believe it's really important to be here and just listen to the name, Guardian Gathering. It's the gathering place where we all come as one.
That's all I have.
Great, Miigwech. Thank you and good afternoon. My name is David Flood. I'm the general manager at Wahkohtowin Development. And we've been operating now going into our 8th operating year. So what I had offered to do, there should be a PDF of 7 years of our financials. I'm letting you look at our books. And there's a good reason for that, because I think there's some interesting trends for ourselves. So I'm not certain if we have the PDF handy. Oh, there it is. Not showing on screen here in front. Can we get it in front as well? Or how's this going to work? I probably can't scroll up and down, eh? Yeah. Okay, for fun, I was called to do the business of Wahkohtowin in around 2015, and the communities got together after about an 8-year period of geopolitical conversation on, what are they going to use to focus on to create this new entity to take up what they're calling low-hanging fruit for things that they've negotiated, and they focused on forestry. And I mentioned yesterday in our program, I was on stage and I said, well, hydroelectric, they kind of had that one under control because there was a consultation requirement and a requirement for economic benefit for communities around hydroelectric development, new site releases in Ontario. And the Mining Act had just gone through a revision in 2012. And again, in there, it talked about having direct agreements. They encouraged them from the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines. But in 1995, the Crown Forest Sustainability Act and its envisionment, and when it come to light and it had this EA and this declaration, it fell way short of consultation, meeting the consultation obligations. And so forestry was their key area of focus. As I mentioned in the bio, I'm a Indigenous practicing forester, and I've been advocating for now close to 30 years to support nation building exercises. So I was really humbled and honored to take this opportunity up. What you'll see here is starting in 2017, and I don't know if we have the 16-17 year. I imagine this is in a PDF, so it's scrolling on a computer. Is that correct? Tech at the back. Is there a 2016-17 year? The year before? Or does it start in 2017? Fair enough. Yeah. So anyway, basically, I'm going to show you the challenges and the opportunities. I was the lone new hire. The communities decided to seed Wahkohtowin for 2 years using some government funding. It was called the New Relationship Fund money. So there's 3 First Nations dropped money into our opening account and said, okay, figure out how to form Wahkohtowin Development Limited Partnership and the General Partnership. We operate the General Partnership, was a 1% holder of the LP shares. The communities are the benefactors of the limited partnership at 99%. That's important because it's a social enterprise now. And we've actually managed to qualify and apply for government funds that says, are you a First Nations organization? While we're incorporated as a for-profit entity, we qualify. We can show them on paper that the benefit derived from whatever we apply to goes back to the communities. So 3 First Nations, 7 million hectares, 7 sustainable forest licenses, a commitment to work on a forest tenure reform model that saw 2 SFLs amalgamated into an enhanced sustainable forest license, and kind of a runway of what we're calling taking our place in full participation in the benefits derived from forestry and the forest sector and forest management. So a couple of the mandates out of the gate were focus on that amalgamation of the forest, come up with a shareholder agreement that saw us become empowered to put our own fingerprints on the way forest management would occur, change the consultation regime to the best of our ability, invest in a sawmill and a cogen that became bankrupt, start a harvesting company, and those are the early years. And so we've done all that. Checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. We've got those agreements and arrangements in place. But what's interesting is Wahkohtowin doesn't own any of that. So we've moved probably in the grand scheme of things in forestry and forest management, the benefits back to our communities. Oh, and there was a 4th one, resource revenue sharing. So we have in our area direct agreements, pilot agreements with resource revenue sharing with our communities and the MNRF on stumpage and mining tax royalty. And I think our current agreements might surpass some of the agreements reached in BC in terms of percentage of sharing. But again, that does not come back to Wahkohtowin. So we're thirsty, we're hungry, we're advocates. We chase every dollar we get after those first 2 years of operation. And then if you just, now that we've probably familiarized ourselves with like the different polygons or the colors, green being government funding, the beige being miscellaneous, the blue being fee for service, and other areas of funding. So just, if we can just scroll to the next slide. And then one more, just watch the colors change. And that puts us to the 22-23 year. So you can see that issue of chasing small pots of money, right? The multiple applications. You can see we've kind of done away with some of that, and we've got larger, more sort of fulsome pots where we rely on a certain amount of fee for service that we get back as an organization through charging out, because we've gone from 1 staff, if you recall, I said, to a financial controller, senior project manager, project forester, guardian program manager, cultural revitalization coordinator, and assistant guardian program manager, and more recently, a policy researcher is going to come on board. So we fleshed out almost 10 staff over the last 7 years, and our budget's gone from about $500,000 to $1.7 million and growing. This is the first year where we actually have our full year ahead budget to cover everyone's salary and all of our programming activities to meet the strategic plan of our organization. So I'm just giving you some of the guts of what it took to get us here and the things that we're going to be doing going ahead. So our new strategic plan has 5 areas. The primary one being sovereignty and jurisdiction, guardian program, innovation, sustainability from a socioeconomic perspective, innovation meaning the new technology and embarking on capitalizing on new technology can help our communities achieve multiple goals. And then of course, cultural revitalization. Where we are in the Chapleau area, Treaty 9 area, we've got huge language loss. We had a residential school right there in the town of Chapleau for one of the two schools, one burned down, the other one ran. It did its job. It really did a number on the nations, the families, the communities, to the point where Missinaba Cree, as an example, they were a landless community for 105 years. They just finally got their reserve designation and are now looking at repopulating. But what an amazing journey for that community, because they managed to rekindle and maintain their relationships over the last 25 years while they've gone through these negotiations. So that was a break. That was a break from their nationhood back at treaty signing in 0506. And then, 50, 75 years, and then capitulating forward, going, no, we are a nation and we're going to stand and move forward as one. So they've maintained a head office in Sault Ste. Marie. So I guess, there's a fight interest here. I argue that Ontario is probably one of the most hardest provincial governments to deal with, looking across Canada, and I've looked at a few. There's a lot of hostility, but of course, Ontario is really hostile towards the federal government. They stand on that St. Catherine's Millings case from the 1800s that says the feds have no responsibility over what is deemed provincial crown lands. So they're going to fight for that tooth and nail as the Section 92 rights holders. And I'm worried about where they think they're going to go with UNDRIP and implementation at the provincial level. That's why I challenged Minister Guilbeault about, leaning in and collaborating harder with the treaty partners and really trying to educate the provinces on their, the distraction that the static that the provinces can create. And I'd like to just open it up more for questions of myself, our programming, and of course our other guests up here. It's always nice to do more interactive work with these presentations, but I thought the color coding was kind of fun, and it takes a little bit of effort. We needed that trifecta: the financial controller, the general manager, and the senior project manager. That's where you get your horsepower to manage your finances, chase the money, and build out your strategic programming requirements. Miigwech.
Thank you, David, and Christine and Scott for your presentation. So we'd like to open the floor to questions from the group. And so I'm just going to do a bit of a visual scan to see if and I see a hand up. So we'll just get a mic brought to you.
And I just estimate that our communities have benefited over $30 million directly and indirectly of the work of Whakotwin. So while we're not funneling the money back into our communities because of the business partnerships and the relationship we formed, that's direct benefit to the communities.
Thank you for your presentation. One of the questions I have is that in Manitoba, the vast majority of our First Nations are through Indian Act 2-year terms, or we have some band custom, which is 4-year terms. So in regards to having stability with the beautiful funding model that you have there, as you can appreciate, with the constant rotation of elected chief and councils, often different priorities coming in and the stability and focus of having funds for different programs and opportunities. How do you juggle that to be able to have the consistency to secure the funds, to keep the management going as it is and to have it growing the way that it has?
Well, the agreements that we have, for example, the carbon credit agreement, 65% of it has to be spent in the Stewardship Guardian program. And the communities can choose what they want to spend the rest of that allocation on. And so most of the time, as I mentioned in the presentation, 100% of the funds that we received are used on stewardship. So it helps to have a network in our area. The coastal network is all of our stewardship offices. So they are the ones that develop a lot of the regional initiatives. And so a lot of the time when the leadership comes in and is able to see the work that's being done regionally and in their individual community, a lot of that work, that legwork of planning is already done. So in most of our communities, because we're, our coastal communities make up 40% of sort of all the oceans in BC. So they're very entrenched in ensuring that that protection of our waters and our forests are embedded in that. So it's never been a problem with ours, but it was really making sure that those measures are in place so that it ensures that those stewardship offices get the money that is meant for them.
Thank you, Christine. Scott or David, would either of you like to?
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit. So there's two prongs to that. So as long as we're exhibiting consistency with our strategic plan, we have a board of directors who also interact with the chiefs of the communities who are shareholder representatives. And our challenge over the last 2 years now really has been to be seen by the communities, as opposed to this concern of, well, what is Wahkaton? Who is Wahkaton? What do they do for us? So our goal is to really drive at being seen and raising that awareness. Like the Guardian program is one of the flagship items, because as we grow the Guardian program, our model is that those Guardians are going to come back to us from a post-secondary perspective, but also become seeds that go into their own lands and resource departments. That's another mandate we have, is to help grow the lands and resource departments for each nation. So really ours is really a reciprocity driven model, a give back model, where I mean, to my chagrin, I would like to see $1 million dropped on our lap every year from our own communities as they receive money back from different sources, but I will never ask for that $1 million, because in some ways, as we stay hungry and we go after those line items of funding, because they're out there. I mean, the federal and provincial government make monies available. So we're looking to capitalize on that money back. And actually our chief said eloquently, we are giving you money. You're going to get our money from the federal and provincial governments. So I hope that helped a little bit in terms of our political model, but in terms of the election cycle, we've also been fortunate that we have 2 Cree communities that have 3-year election cycles, and our chiefs have been with us for the last 4 terms. So we don't quite have that volatility, but it's a good point you raised about the political volatility, but we've not experienced that as of yet.
I see another hand here, and then we'll go to the back of the room.
Hello. So how is everybody doing? My name is Gordon Blue Sky. I'm the chief of Broken Head Ojibwe Nation. My community is just north of Winnipeg in Manitoba. One of the things I was just discussing here from one of my communities in the north was that, again, I missed the beginning of the presentation. I'm sorry, I had a phone call. But one of the things that I've noticed for the couple of days that I've been here is that there's a lot of projects that are happening, in remote, it feels like remote areas. And of course, that's good. And I have no issue with that. But I believe that we need to also make space for our communities, such as myself. We're just about 20 minutes outside of Winnipeg. And our territory looks like this, you know, when I hear Kitigan ZB talking about their territory and acknowledging that, you know, Treaty 1, where I'm from, is essentially underneath farm fields and municipalities, private lands. Like even if we start a Guardian program, and I honestly feel that my community and my people and the 7 members that are part of Treaty 1 need a Guardian program, because we have very little, if anything, left. If anything, we got lots of things to monitor that's happening in our territory, and lots of impacts that are happening as well. So I'm sorry that I missed the beginning, and I was just asking Leander in regards to like I believe the funding that's available, and I wanted to speak to the executive director at some point. There should be specific allocations for communities like ourselves that are kind of, you know, we don't have the remoteness, we don't have the vastness as other communities enjoy, but we also have a responsibility just the same. And I just feel like in Manitoba, and again, no offense to my friends, all the programs are up north. And I feel like we're being missed. Maybe it's because of our geography, I don't know. But it's something that I'd like to discuss with the ILI, the National Guardians, and sort of starting to develop a bit of a pocket where we've had applications go in that have been denied. It's just, we just want to see how it works, because we feel like we're being missed because we don't have thousands of open areas or caribou, or, you know, the seals and so on that's going on in Manitoba, which is really good. And I really do appreciate that work that they're doing, because it is essentially for all of us. But there are pockets that I believe that are being misrepresented, and it'd be nice to, and I'm sorry again, I missed the beginning of the discussion, and I was thinking about, and you referenced the carbon credits, but it's almost like the same kind of idea in terms of expanding more money coming into this type of work. Would be interesting if industries or stuff like that, because I don't know what, like if there's like a unwritten policy or something that we don't receive money from industries. I don't know if that's something that, but it would be neat if we could start to really have a type of carbon type credit program that would allow for more resources coming in, so we're not so limited. Because I feel like we are, and in Manitoba and my territory, I can't just point at one industry that's impacted me. It's all of them, and I'd like for them to contribute for our program to be monitored within our territory. And I believe that's something that we should, you know, as leadership, we should have conversations with the board or whoever's working with the National Guardians, because that's why I'm here this week, is to gather information and hopefully bring something back to not just my First Nation, but to our territory. Which
Must see for that. Yeah, maybe before I turn it over to you, David, I just want to acknowledge your comments. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of the panel. My name is Dati Tetso. I'm the Deputy Director of ILI. And before I started working with the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, I was working in our in the Decho territory of the Northwest Territories, and we fit the description you just outlined, you know, remote, vast territory. But one of the things that I've noticed as I've stepped into this role with the ILI that's more nationally scoped, you know, I have this opportunity now to not just connect with people within my region, but people across the country. And one of the things that I've seen in the Guardians work that exists from community to community to community is really that relationship to land, and that that connection to language, culture, and way of life. And I think I just wanted to just acknowledge your comments and empathize with your perspective, and just sort of validate your perspective that as urban-based, urban connected people, that your relationship to land still exists, that you have knowledge to offer, and that that resourcing needs to be addressed. But maybe I'll ask David to maybe elaborate or expand.
Yeah, Chimegwech Chief, as you're standing there listing, you know, the framework of your situation, my technial mind is going, I'm trying to write a briefing note in my mind right now for the best approach you might want to take to go and establish your relationship, that geopolitical relationship with your place. We have rights on private land. The courts have ruled that. Now, the challenge is, the risk of being shot by a private landowner for going and doing your inherent right on that private land. But the reality is, a fellow shot a moose in a swamp on a farmer's land, didn't break the fence, got the moose, pulled it out, and was said, yes, you have that right to go and do that. That swamp has not got nothing to do with that agricultural purposing. So I guess what I'm just trying to say on that, in that sphere of conversation, is that there's probably an avenue for your collective nations to form some sort of relationship with your private landholders in that area for a range of reasons, carbon being one. The feds are looking at opening up carbon projects on private land as a priority under protocol. Further to that, you can open up a range of set-asides that could qualify for future carbon projects and be the actual land steward managers and developers of those carbon projects in partnership with the private landholders. A blanket email to all the landholders, because there's a registry for that. You could send notes to everybody, and then your guardians can take shape from there. What could you offer those land? How about species at risk? How about invasive species? How about, there's your program, there's your guardians. I believe there is eligibility for your nations. I'd be happy to work with you on that briefing and that proposal. I hope.
I might suggest that you get in contact with the Squamish Nation out in British Columbia. They are the traditional territory owners of the Vancouver sort of region, and they've done some really great work just on what you said. They work really closely with the port. They have a stewardship program as well. So they're the closest ones that I can think of that you would probably get a wealth of experience and knowledge from, and they share their knowledge so freely too as well.
Thank you, Christine and David. We had a question at the back of the room.
Is it not working? Okay, the battery's dead. Hi, my name is Cheyenne Hunt. I'm from the English River First Nation, and I come from Northern Saskatchewan. And we have one of the richest and purest uranium deposits in the Athabasca Basin in Northern Saskatchewan. So as such, we have 5 existing uranium mines within our traditional territory. So as part of that mining and exploration, what we've done is we've signed exploration agreements with these different companies and baked in a Guardians program saying, if you are going to be in our territory, your key is to have our Guardians on site. My challenge is funding my Guardians administrator, who's sitting here beside me today. I'm looking for maybe some feedback on possibly a structure or maybe some kind of a sharing network of opportunities for funding that can help me find core funding for him. Because right now I'm doing the piecemeal things, putting together 1,000 patches to make a quilt in funding. I spend 40% of my time researching, filling out grants, and then reporting for them when I'm looking for something that can give me stable income to help that person who is training my Guardians, making sure we've got contact with them, updating our database so that when one of those uranium company, exploration companies is doing work on our territory, we can send out our Guardians underneath our exploration agreements. And I'm wondering what kind of feedback you've gotten, specifically, David.
We were supposed to meet. We've connected through LinkedIn, and I was kind of excited to think about your situation. You're part of the Meadow Lake Group.
Correct.
And I haven't heard you say that you've got direct agreements with your forestry company.
No.
Or companies. And they're also FSC certified. And if you follow, this is for everybody, by the way, forestry and forest certification schemes and Forest Stewardship Council certification is the premier gold standard that all of our Indigenous communities should want to see in place on overlapping your nation's territories. It's got principles within it. There's 10 The third one is upholding and protecting the rights of Indigenous people. And the new national standard has a priority there that says we uphold UNDRIP with this new national standard, and we require FPIC agreements by the tenure holders, the forest manager that gets an area certified under this scheme. And the goal and reason for that is FSC is an international certificate. Some of you might know SFI. It was an industry-born certification scheme, and they're growing, but they're playing in a more of a North American market and interplaying a little bit internationally. But the FSC brand is an international model because there's Indigenous people, as we all know, around the world that have forests where maybe the governments are not managing landscapes appropriately. But anyway, I digress a little bit further. I'm just pumping the tires on FSC because I was on their board for 4 years, and you should really check them out. You should come to our website. We've got a bunch of learning materials there as well. But anyway, back to your forestry contingent. I would offer, again, we should have a little more dialogue here, but they should be able to get into they're meant to be a direct arrangements with each of your First Nations or your nations. And if you have a collective, a larger grouping, that should be an easy win. So our communities directly are affected by FSC certified forests. Each of them are pulling in anywhere from 60 to 90,000 a year with that direct agreement. Now you got to remember your forest company might have 18 First Nations to work with on that geography they're calling their certified forest area. So, ease up on them a little bit. They're not, if you look at most forest companies, they're, the markets do this. So you got to figure out a mechanism that is workable, but they'll give you that long-term investment to create that foundation of stewardship because it's an obligation under the standard. And the battery's dead again. Well, you draft the briefing note and the agreement, and it says the money will go into your Guardian program.
And I know that ours in BC is a little bit different. If you've been able to watch some of the pieces that are happening in BC, we have a lot of reconciliation agreements that are happening. And a lot of the time you can ensure that these pieces can be embedded in those reconciliation. Coastal First Nations, we're doing a regional reconciliation with the BC government. So I'm not sure about the other provinces if they have that, but it's something to push your province on as well. There's a number of reconciliation agreements that are happening in BC that you can take a look at.
Okay. All right. We have time for a few more questions. So I'm just doing a visual scan of this room and I see a hand here. So if we could get a mic brought there.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan. I work for Parks Canada. I have a question, and David, it's for you. It's just about fee for service. What services do you sell to people, and how do you make money off that? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So as I said, our communities are very much interested in deriving opportunities for full participation in forestry and forest management. One of our areas of activity is with our current group of companies to get rid of herbicide spraying. So we actually have seasonally our guardians going out and doing vegetation management index surveys where we get reimbursed for that. And so that's a bit of a closed loop where through doing those veg index surveys, it allows the forester to go up in a helicopter, look at these plots and actually reduce the amount of herbicide that's sprayed annually. And we've got a pretty sophisticated system in place right now. So both things are happening. Our guardians are learning new skills. Our guardians are becoming more empowered to be out on their land base and understand what that role or function is that they're doing. And they come away with a bit of a sense of pride knowing that had they have not done some of these plots, maybe business as usual would have been to spray. So that's just a small example. And then other examples are because I have a project forester in place and I'm a forester as well. We charge ourselves out through consultancy work as a way of, charging back our time and interest. So I've provided advisory services to other collaborative partners in terms of doing business or work with each other. collaborated with communities to look at how to build a lands and resource department. I have a bit of a process that I use. It really starts with a band council resolution. I mean, this is about nation building now. You're getting into the crux of it. So that advisory service is also billable for my time. And we also, as a strategy, build ourselves our professional time into our applications. So some people, well, that's double dipping. Wakatoan just got a bunch of money and you're charging professional fees. No, there's two different things. Yes, we qualified for the application, but we are literally providing professional fees or services to collect those fees. It'd be no different if I hired someone outside of myself. If I can self-supply it, I will. Pretty smart, eh? That's a good question though. But to your point about parks, I mean, parks with the chief over here, you know, if there's any parks, I would add that to the list of things that could help, you know, build the repertoire of the Guardian program to do things that Parks Canada needs or provincial parks, or, you know, there's a ton of, I mean, this is about boots on the ground, right? And one of the biggest complaints our communities have is you don't see what's going on the ground. So pay us. Like we're here, we live here. It takes you 6 hours to get here. Why don't you let us be that voice on the ground, the eyes and ears on the ground, and pay us for that interactive service with your departments? So those are all very achievable collaborative things, right? And if we're going to do reconciliation and nation to nation work, I mean, that's the baseline of UNDRIP, acknowledging that sense of place and the rights of the people to have that voice in their homeland.
I saw the mic go to the back of the room. Would you like to go ahead?
Hi. Do you have experience with the Indigenous protected conserved areas? And if you do, one of the things that I'm running into is that my provincial government does not want to grant the entire area that we want as an Indigenous protected area because it is uranium rich. So they're like, no, 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 you can't protect that area. We're making so much money out of the uranium there. So they've given us a certain area to declare, but what we want to do is declare it just as the nation being an Indigenous protected conserved area, not necessarily underneath the program itself. Do you have any feedback or any kind of information or words of wisdom to kind of bolster or maybe a sneaky way that you know your experience?
Well, this is being broadcasted, I think, so we're public right now. So not so sneaky. But I think, you know, one, stick with it, two, make the vocalization and put the authority out there that is the Declaration of the Nations, that is that is the goal, that is your goal, and then just stick with it. I could imagine zonation is probably something feasible. I've seen on some of the other Taidanene map about like 3 different zones and things like that, and trying to work with your Section 92 little brother partner. I mean, you got another hostile government over there, right? And the challenge, of course, is going to be, it's going to be over time. Over time, you're going to get to your destination. But yeah. Well, they've only recently filed the Sovereignty Act, right? So, so there's some grumbling that like Minister Guilbeault has to do. And if I'm going to be sneaky, I wouldn't be sneaky. I'd be upfront and vocal and find your aligned partners that can resource you better to help you invest in that conservation model. So let's just keep talking, because I think there's folks out there that are interested in helping.
Christine, would you like to add?
Yeah, there's one of our communities called Kitisu Jeje. They've actually this summer, or actually was last summer, declared one of their areas from their community a protected area. And the way they did it was quite unique. They also did consultation with stakeholders within that area and let them know why they are doing what they're doing. Some of the pieces that we're looking at is expanding that to the rest of our communities, but a lot of our job was to really do communications outwards. So we would it's not sort of preaching to the converted, which is everybody here. It's those other people that don't understand why you are designating that area protected, no matter what the province has to say about that. You have to be the narrator of that story because if you aren't the narrator of that story, the province will narrate their own story. So that, I think, was some of the success that they have seen, but they did a lot of communications ahead of time, and we always continue to do that, whether it's our provincial, global news segments. We are always sending that message out so that it can reach those people that may not know, because that's who really we need to educate as to why you're doing that. So I can give you the name of that. You can take a look at their website, and there's also some communications, Angus, I think, I don't know if he's here or not, but they do that. They really get that message out, and we do things like Facebook sponsored. You all have seen that, those Facebook sponsored ads. Those are designated to certain areas, certain age groups, certain communities. So it's very focused, and it's something that we don't do really too well as Indigenous communities, is knowing that that's a tool, and we have to utilize that tool, because if we don't utilize the tool, the government is definitely utilizing that tool.
Thank you, Christine.
I just wanted to add to a comment about you were saying about how would you become a park or a conservation area without the government and any other partners. I don't think that it would be possible, because we would have to do co-management or something. And, like with Aitanenena, I know they have all the parties that are, affected in that area, the Northwest Territories Métis, and the Quechua people. And they what they did was, they fundraised $15 million from philanthropy, and they did a proposal, and they started negotiating with Canada and also a GNWT to create the park and do the Indigenous protections, conservation, things like that. And they also have a tier government. So you have a regional management, so you have all your nations that are involved, and then you have an implementation government where Iris is the manager of that, where they make the decisions on where to put the signs and who to hire and stuff like that. So, and thank you guys for your presentations. And I had a question. Sorry. Well, the governance model of your nations, I know it's probably a chief and council model, but are there any other forms of committees that assist you when you're doing your work plans and making your budgets to get approved?
Hi, just in terms of our working with the nations and going after funding, I find I'm the technician in the group. So, writing these proposals to ILI or to others, it's making sure that we work with the chief and council so we're not competing against each other. In other cases, we'll have hereditary chiefs who, can make those decisions. We have a board that our executive director will take proposals to make sure that it is, appropriate, that these fit within their land use plans or in their marine plans or within their stewardship vision, to make sure that we follow their direction of where they're wanting to go. So we try to make sure that we're in line with what the chief and council of the time, if it's chief and council or if it's the hereditary system. So.
At Coastal First Nations, we've done what we call a business plan, and by no means do all of the funds that we get cover the work and the vastness that we need to cover. So probably about 2 years ago, we've developed this business plan that talks about the business case for the funding for those specific Watchman programs in our communities. So that allows us to have conversations with federal government, provincial government, stakeholders, and it allows us to know what it really costs, because sometimes you just get bare minimal in order to run the Watchman programs in our communities. And it's such vast, important work. I think Kirisu Hehe Chief Doug Nieslaus does a presentation, and he talks about, he has a map of his territory, and he throws up DFOs when they come and check those areas. And there's probably like maybe 10 red spots, maybe 11. And then he throws up what their coastal watchman program does, and it just lights up the whole page. And so that's the vastness of what we do, not because we're getting paid to go out here and do that. It's because it's our responsibility in our communities to ensure that we are tracking, we're identifying if there are issues that are coming up. Our Guardian Watchmen in our area have what we call a coastal tracker that allows us to gather all the information, all the data, so that they're feeding it up to Chief and Council saying, listen, this is what we're finding out here. In the Haida Nation, green crabs are a big one. We're finding them almost everywhere now, and they're very invasive. So they're really taking a look at those. So I think it's also about that communication to show them these are the things that we're looking at, and this is how we're feeding it up.
And that's a great question for the Wahkohtowin program. We were top heavy into leaning hard and leaning into, cracking the forestry, forest management, and forest sector code. We've only gotten our cultural revitalization goal established in the last 3 years. It's an underpinning, and we finally have a cultural revitalization coordinator in place. And what I see happening in a very fast way is the matriarchal enrichment of that, where we're getting the big anti-energy coming out, and we're doing the moon ceremonies and the drumming and singing, and the ceremony is just, you can see it, and the people are hungry for it. And I don't know if I've mentioned in the last 2 days, but our Guardian program was birthed from an elders visioning exercise where they established this notion of the covenant of relationships for developing a Guardian program. So we actually have not just a thought about orally transferred, it's written down in such a way that we're so those two things are going to intersect. And we've since, through the transition of forming Wahkohtowin, lost our elders advisory committee. But I feel like with the cultural revitalization platform that's been created, we're going to see an elders committee formed very soon across the communities. And they are kind of few and far between in our area. But that's a great question, because that's how we're only going to get better is with more voice of the ceremony is meant to drive the majority of what we do. And now we've got something in place to help with that.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Thank you for your answers. I appreciate that. One more question. I guess it's kind of more specific to your budgets. And I've seen your projection overhang here on the screen, and you had a lot of the how would I say it? The overall picture of the money you're bringing in. However, I guess me, I manage a program, so I know what we spend, what we spend the money on, but most people in the room, the guardians and such, probably don't know the exact amount of money that's being spent. So like, what would you say your guardian groups are spending? Because I don't think you're doing just observations, you're doing like water sonde, so you're sending your samples out to labs, or you're dissecting fish and you're sending that out to laboratory for laboratory work, or any soil contamination. I've seen you guys pulling cores out of the ground and stuff like that. So is there a specific amount of per year that you would spend on laboratory work? And does that take away from your operational costs? And how do you manage that?
So just quickly, in terms of like the core sampling, yes, that certainly was a piece that did cost and did take away from sort of what Guardians could do. The archaeologists, registered professional archaeologists, put that in his proposal, for example, that it was going to cost so much to do that testing. On the other side, we do work with partners that do that analysis and testing for us. So those partnerships are really, really key for areas that we don't have that expertise. And they will do it for, quote, free, but then what does that mean? You know, we've got to do with them. So anyway, so we do try to look at those relationships and build those relationships so that we have those partnerships that can pick up in areas that we're interested, that don't cost us a lot of funds.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm just noting the time. This has been a really engaging conversation. I'd like to thank each of the presenters for sharing their experiences and their knowledge, and for all of you for the discussion and the questions. And so I'd just like to offer a round of applause to our presenters today. And we have a bit of a gift for each of you. So Mussy. We're good, yeah. Yeah, so thank you all. I think we've concluded our agenda for the day, and we look forward to gathering with you all tomorrow morning. So must see. Have a good evening.
That's fine.